Okay, Nick and Andy, it was much anticipated, and we're now going to focus on what we learned from Mauricio Pochettino's debut in charge of the US men's national team. Obviously, a 2-0 win against Panama at home, which was great. A 2-0 defeat away to Mexico, which wasn't as great in those two friendlies, but lots of injuries, players leaving camp, key absentees to deal with. Nick Mendola, going to come to you first, mate. What were your overall thoughts on your first Poch experience in the USA?
Trending positively. It still feels like the idea is great, and I look forward to it. It's almost impossible to judge. So many players were missing, and granted, that could be a realistic thing to worry about, given that Reyna's injury history hasn't been great. There are Tyler Adams, who is just coming back into full training for the Cherries. So, how do I feel? I feel like they beat a team they should have beaten, given their roster. They lost to a team that, as Andy wrote in his 3 Things We Learned, they lost to a team that needed a win to keep this rivalry feeling as unctuous as it should be. So I don't feel like, other than there was a sense of what they wanted to do against Panama when they were in the ascendancy, that made me feel like, all right, let's see this with a healthy team.
Andy, the Panama game that Nick mentioned there, that was when, especially down the left side, Pulisic, Anthony Robinson, you guys wrote about it in your columns. That was a real positive. And okay, this is where the US can dominate games from that side of the pitch. But also the 3-4-3, 3-4-2, or whatever you want to call it, the way that Poch set them up, that tactical flexibility and just the freshness about it. That seemed to help, right? A lot of the players and probably the fan base and just everybody are like, okay, this is different. We're going in a new direction now.
Yeah, it seemed to suit the personnel that he had for this camp. You don't have Gio Reyna, you don't have Tim Weah, you don't have Balogun available either. And it's like you very quickly are getting into the depths of the player pool for Pochettino's debut, and you want to have this fast start, and you want it to look really good, and you just don't have the personnel there to do it. And so I felt like coming out of the Panama game, Nick laid it out there, I think, perfectly. You should beat Panama, whether you have your A team, whether you have your B team, whether you have your B- team, probably. Just where Panama is at right now. The fact they were able to really comfortably control the game with Gianluca Busio and Aiden Morris in central midfield, I think is a huge, huge sign going forward that, yes, it matters who's in there. It would be great to have Tyler Adams, running the midfield. But if he's not there, it's not going to completely fall apart. I don't hope, without his presence in there. Joe, you mentioned the left side. Let's talk about the right side a little bit. Pochettino putting Yunus Musa out there, kind of not on the wing, not at right back, just remember when there were wide midfielders in the game of football? That used to be a thing about 15 or 20 years ago. He kind of had that role there, and he spoke after the game. Pochettino knew him from his youth days at Valencia, and just the familiarity with him to put him into that role. And Musa had a really great game at a very important time for him, not playing hardly at all for AC Milan, needs an opportunity whether there or somewhere else. It was a good showpiece window for him.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that the players that were missing, the list was pretty incredible. And then we also had players leaving after the first game against Panama and going back to their club teams. Obviously, Weston McKennie, Christian Pulisic, they highlighted, and those are the main guys that led that exodus before the game away against Mexico. Nick, what do we make of that? Because Poch, you listened to a few of his press conferences even before the Panama game, and he was already kind of laying the seeds there for this. We need to have these players go back and be in better condition than when they turned up for us, and look after their clubs, and then they will look after the players for us. And I guess this is his first time, obviously, it being an international manager, and he's trying to manage all those relationships with the top clubs in Europe and trying to look after Pulisic and McKennie and others who have had kind of checkered past with injuries. So there's a lot of concern there. So is he being, I guess, respectful to the clubs? Is that almost taken away from the US a little bit? Is it a really difficult balance and a line to kind of tread, right, where you want to keep the clubs happy, but you also have to have as many of your best players playing together to get that chemistry before the World Cup in 2026?
I think it's almost totally fine, because unless you're someone just trying to make arguments or serve as a sort of clown to back up your own narrative. Look, the United States national team last month let Anthony Robinson stay back. And they let Anthony Robinson stay back because he picked up an injury for the summer and he was playing every minute for Fulham. And when we see this discussion, every club manager seems to be talking about it. They'll defer to their players. Players are now talking about overuse. And I know the numbers, like the studies say that they're not actually playing more soccer, but it's in their heads. So how much is it going to matter to them to hear a coach say, I get you, I feel you, let's have you ripe when it matters? I think it's political and it makes a heck of a lot of sense. And you didn't hear Pulisic complain about it. You didn't hear McKennie complain about it. You didn't hear about Fossey complain about it. All these guys at least left camp feeling good with their position in the national team and good about what they were going home to. And I don't know. I think that's smart.
I think it's very smart from Pochettino to do that early and kind of build up that respect level from the clubs and say, hey, remember when we sent Pulisic back and McKennie back and didn't risk them having an injury? Like, can you maybe do us a favor now if they're only 60-70% fit, and then release them for a camp? So I think savvy from Pochettino, and I think it was just a glimpse into the personal side of him, right, Andy? We both support teams where he's been the manager before, and he cares about these players, and most of them are very young players, and he understands the kind of almost father figure he has to be to manage them developmentally, emotionally, on the pitch as players. He kind of does the whole package, and I feel like that's why we thought, all of us, that he would be a good fit for this young US team.
Yeah, and he doesn't have to in this job. He could come in and say, he could look at his career as a coach now and say, hey, he's been to levels higher than any player in the national team pool has been. He knows better. What he says goes. He could come in with that approach, and he didn't. He came in with an open ear, and I'm guessing an arm around some shoulders to get to know some guys, players that he knows already, players that he doesn't, and just start building those relationships with them. I think I try to think of it through the player's perspective. First camp you go in, new coach, it's a big name, he's a big profile, it's the name that everybody wanted, there's now expectation on you once again. How is he going to act? How is he going to, what kind of guy is he going to be like? And it does seem like he came in a low-key, kind of disarming way. It's going to get a little more intense. I'll let you know that right now. That's the way that Pochettino does his business. But at least early on, he's just laying, building those relationships, laying the foundation of what this team is going to be under him. And to the point that you made there, Joe, from a fit perspective, not that anything's going to change against Panama and Mexico in October, but it does feel like that's been a bit reinforced by this international window, that whatever the results were, whatever the performance against Mexico was, the players are all on the same side. I think they always were. But more importantly, and this is one of the things that I wrote about after the Panama game, I think the fans are back on side with the U.S. men's national team. And it's been a while. You guys remember when it was when it was the cool thing to do, to follow and support the U.S. men's national team all over the country and all over the region. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. And talking about the region, they are heading next in action, Nick, in November. They're heading to Jamaica for the first leg of the Nations League quarterfinal, second leg at home in St. Louis. What do we expect from that? Because again, Andy mentioned it, it's ramping up a little bit more to play for in these games. And Steve McLaren's just taken over Jamaica, and they've got some very talented attacking players, as we've seen over the years. So this is a big step up for Pochettino.
Yeah, it is a step up, and these are meaningful games, ones you can't lose. There's a chance that some of these big faces, big names that you didn't have this window won't be available next window, and it's less of an excuse, right? You're not sending Pulisic home between legs in an elimination situation. And these sort of games, given that their best effort, and granted, as an aside, I am so excited to see a full-strength team in the Gold Cup for the first time in forever. That will be fun. It'll lend a little bit more to that tournament, but these are the evaluation options. This is something that will mean a lot to Jamaica, and whether it has to be manufactured or not, the U.S., it has to mean something to them too. So, really excited to see it, and hopefully for the first time to see Balogun playing for Mauricio Pochettino, to see Tim Weah playing for Mauricio Pochettino, because I still think there are going to be some odd men out. And sorry, one other note, the midfield was so depleted more than any other position. So, De La Torre, Johnny Cardoso, McKennie didn't play a minute. There were Tyler Adams. So what Andy pointed out, I think, should be underlined. The fact that they did what they did against Panama, I think, is a great sign.
Yeah, it's a great sign. And some of those players have gone back towards fitness as well. Tyler Adams is almost back for Bournemouth, which is great news as well. So we'll keep you updated of all the latest news from the US men's national team ahead of this Nations League quarterfinal against Jamaica coming up next month. What's going on with Pochettino? Who's being called up? Who's looking good in Europe? We'll keep you updated with the latest as this new era has started pretty well for Pochettino and the US men's national team.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host of NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And if you want even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock.